Hey.
Well, I want to welcome everybody to tonight's Ocean Science Lecture, and I'm AlgaeHannasakpt1. I'm the coordinator of the series, and also tonight I'm the speaker. So here for St. Patrick's Day, 2 for 1. I'll talk to the bar about that. Maybe we can cut a deal here. I appreciate you all coming. I know that a lot of people do a lot of other more festive things and come listen to somebody like me. Next week's lecture is going to be given by Dr. Sarah Edge. I believe Sarah's here somewhere.
Right here.
Somewhere. There she is. You may have heard Sarah speak last year in her first lecture in the series. She's going to speak this year on using ecological genomics to measure the impacts of global climate change on reef building corals. And I think you know from various lectures, including Sarah's last year, that corals worldwide are impacted by a multitude of stressors, including the effects of global climate change. And Sarah will investigate potential uses of new technology to forecast the future of our coral reefs. And a lot of this is new technology to Harbor Branch that she's basically been the person to be responsible for bringing here. So I think you'll really enjoy her talk, and I hope that you all come. And I think with that, we can segue right into introducing tonight's speaker. It's going to take a lot longer than normal. Actually, it won't. Okay, so tonight's speaker is me. In addition to what's in the program about me and things that I'll say in my talk, I think what most people always ask about speakers is, what's their background? I grew up in New Jersey. I always like to say I'm from New Jersey. A lot of people like to say I'm from somewhere else. And I got my bachelor's degree in biological sciences at Rutgers University, which is the state university in New Jersey. Then I went to the University of Rhode Island and I got my master's in botany and my PhD in biological sciences at the University of Rhode Island. I was very lucky after that to receive a postdoctoral fellowship here at Harbor Branch. My research has always revolved around marine plants, which is a very broad way of saying seagrasses, seaweeds. I'm going to talk about the algae today. And I've always been interested in how those organisms interact with the environment, and you'll get a taste of that in the talk. I'm also very interested in ocean science education at all levels. And that includes formal courses such as we do with our university students. I see some of our semester by semester students over there. And also graduate students. And also informal, which is oftentimes younger students, but also it's the public. So you're all part of that ocean science education that I enjoy doing. Oh, my time's up. So for somebody who seldom actually wears a real hat, I've been lucky to have worn many figurative hats here over the years, and I've really had an opportunity for tremendous personal and career development. So that's why I'm still here. And so I appreciate this opportunity again. I appreciate you coming out on a festive holiday such as St. Patrick's Day. And I'm going to talk tonight on something entitled Algae. This is a color. And Brian, now I'm done with my introduction and the official taping can begin. So, Just so you know, my introductions are never taped because I never know what to say. All right, so you all sit there, Brian? Yeah. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The title, algae. This is a color. So how did I come up with that? Well, first of all, I started to think, when nobody else was willing to take this particular date, I said, I haven't talked about algae really in any of my lectures, a little bit, and I've always looked for different quotes oftentimes in my lectures. Some of you heard a lot of my lectures know that I like to do that. And so the very first time I was on this podium in the lecture series, I read a poem that was written by someone who was on the beach looking out on the ocean and pondering what it must be like far away, out to sea, down deep, and looking at it from the shoreline. And I actually invited the folks in the room that night that was what we wanted to do with these lectures, was to try to engage everybody who maybe didn't get to go out and see some of the things we all saw. Then there was a time where I actually did a talk around a Kermit the Frog song for inspiration. It's not easy being green. That would have been appropriate for St. Patrick's Day too, I guess. And most recently, I think I took a line out of the alma mater of one of the local high schools that basically implied that the Indian River used to be a lot bluer and a lot different than it is today. And we talked about that last year. So I said, this year I'm going to talk about algae because I haven't talked about it, and we have to beef it up. I'm not going to use a poem, I'm not going to use a frog. I got to go with a scientist. So if you're going to go with a scientist, who's the scientist? First scientist's name that would come to your mind. Top scientist, all time, number one. Good answer, Dennis Hansack. Wrong. But you will get extra credit.
Democritus.
What's that?
Democritus.
Nah.
That's a Greek one.
Yeah, it's not bad.
No.
Galileo.
Galileo is very good.
No.
Younger, more recent. Einstein, right. What's the epitome of a scientist that equates to genius? You're an Einstein, right? So I said, aha, for inspiration this year, let's go with Einstein.
But he's a mathematician.
Here he is.
He is a mathematician, good point.
What
We let him in, Great theoretical physicist, right?
What about Feynman?
That would be a good though.
Fine.
Yes.
Anyway, Albert Einstein has a lot of great quotes. And he talks about science, he talks about religion, he talks about society, he talks about all kinds of things. So he really was a true genius. So I thought, well, let's go with Einstein. You can imagine my surprise when it turns out that this was not the same Einstein that said this quote, but it was the Walter Matthau version of Einstein. And if you've never seen this movie, you need to see IQ, which was an early Meg Ryan and an early Tim Robbins movie.
Yeah.
Matthau was in between his two Grumpy Old Men movies, so this is sort of like a counterbalance to that. And he's a sweet scientist, Einstein, taking care of his niece, played by Meg Ryan. And at some point, he utters the words, algae, this is a color. But it turns out that actually color of algae is a real important thing historically with how we look at these. And that sort of led me to the train of thought that evolved into the talk tonight. So my overview is, first of all, describe to you what algae are in general. I'm going to give you an overview of what I call algal biodiversity. I'm going to talk about why are algae important. And then I'm going to sort of seg into some of the things that I've done over the years that I'm just going to select a few examples to try to support some of the other things I'm saying about algae. And over the years, I've actually worked in a number of different habitats or environments or ecosystems, including coral reefs, deep water algae, and so on. And I decided to take two because of the time limit. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Indian River Lagoon, and I'm going to talk a little bit about marine biomass farming, which was some work that was more in the aquaculture area. So that's what I'm going to try to do tonight, and hopefully we'll see how this goes. First of all, algae, the word itself, is actually from the Latin word for seaweed. And most of you have used the word seaweed. It's the macroscopic algae that oftentimes you'll see cast ashore, or you'll see them drifting around in your lagoon. And we'll have some pictures of those later. Algae as a group are considered to be photosynthetic. They produce oxygen, they fix carbon. We'll talk about that in a little bit. They all have the master chlorophyll pigment for photosynthesis, chlorophyll A, which sets them apart. They have very little tissue differentiation compared to what we consider to be higher plants, so you're familiar with trees and grasses. Algae have no organs. What is an organ in a plant? An organ in a plant is root, stem, leaf. So pretty simple. But algae don't even have anything that complicated. And they've got no vascular tissue like trees do, for example, to move water through the length of the plant. Algae have simple reproductive structures. So unlike, for example, seed plants that you know about or flowering plants, they have no protective cells, extra cells around the zygote. So when they reproduce, it's very simple without a lot of extra protection for the cells. One of my real pet peeves is you've used the word algaes. Algaes is not a word. Now, no offense to anybody who uses that, but I won't answer your questions if you use the word algae in your question. The singular is alga, the plural is algae. Okay? There's no such thing as algae. Many scientists actually use the word algae, and I just shake my head and move on. But don't do it. Phycology, I study phycology. I call myself a phycologist. It comes from the Greek word meaning the study of seaweeds. And in fact, again, the emphasis on the word seaweed, that's what the ancient Greeks and Romans had studied. And actually, some of the early classification schemes for organisms were based on where they lived. So if it was land or sea, they were considered different types of organisms. Oops, not advancing. So it throws up, Jill. So time out. Oops, we're here. Okay. Doesn't seem to be working, Jill. Okay. I'm going to talk about algal biodiversity. And before I talk about algal biodiversity, it occurred to me that I don't know that we've ever, in the lecture series, defined biodiversity very well. I use it to introduce speakers a lot, and some of our speakers use the word. What does biodiversity mean? I'm having trouble, Jill. We're going to have to reboot or something here.
Can I suggest that we do that?
Yeah, can we reboot? Brian wants to reboot.
Sorry, everyone.
Meanwhile, we'll watch IQ. It's really cool.
It'll be better if we do.
Yeah, it won't work the other way. We're about ready to buy a new computer for the back. Somebody come by and look at it today. We're hoping we get through this one. Sarah, I think it's just got one more lecture left on it. You're writing your talk though, right?
Am I right? What?
Yeah, she's writing her talk right
Yes,
there.
I'm
So.
currently putting it together.
We usually have somebody play the didgeridoo when this happens.
Funny, we were talking about
St.
that.
Patrick's Day.
Talking about that in the break.